Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us on How to Pitch a Journalist. I have with me, and I'm very nervous about this, three very well-read, very versatile journalists who I'm not going to ask much from, just to divulge their deepest, darkest PR secrets, best practices, and most importantly, tell us what not to do when engaging the media. And so, Grace, Eric, Matt, in good old PR press release fashion, can you please introduce yourselves?
You killed it. You're doing good. I love it. My name is Grace Sharkey. I'm a staff writer and a Sirius XM host for FreightWaves. I have been in journalism much less than these two, but for me, I joined FreightWaves as actually an ex-chief strategy officer at a $80 million brokerage up in Michigan. I left there to start consulting, and in that work, of course, met a number of people at FreightWaves, and I really wanted to contribute to writing about freight technology in a way that could also capture the people who are using those tools and dealing with a lot of the problems that those tools are hopefully and continuing to solve. And so I've been in this work for about 2 years now, and enjoy making not just writing, but also a lot of video and media content as well.
Hi, I'm Eric Johnson, Senior Technology Editor at the Journal of Commerce, or JOC.com. I have been in the industry, or writing about the industry, for about 20 years now, which is terrifying. For the last 5 with Journal of Commerce, I focus, like Grace, on technology. For about the last dozen or so years, I've been almost totally focused in that area. The job has changed a lot in my time. I started off writing just stories, and now it's all about, different channels, and I do a twice monthly show on Let's Talk Supply Chain, and I have my own Substack newsletter that's usually weekly, not the last 2 weeks, but it's usually weekly. So yeah, it's been interesting to observe internally how the sort of job profile has changed, and I'm sure we'll get into that, but nice to be with you all here today.
Thanks, Eric. Matt?
Hey, everybody. I'm Matt Villano. I am a full-time freelance journalist. I've been doing this now 26 years. Proudly never held a full-time job other than this one. Unlike my colleagues, I am a generalist. So I cover everything from family travel and gambling to technology and occasionally business and related industries. So always pitching stories to a variety of different outlets. I've contributed to the New York Times, CNN, Wall Street Journal, a ton of travel magazines. And I also, just fittingly, since we're here in Vegas, I have written and updated 14 guidebooks about Las Vegas under the Foders brand. So if you guys have any questions about where to party, you can hit me up afterwards or send me a message. But also really happy to be here. Been in the industry my whole life, and excited and eager to share any insights I can with you.
Isn't family travel and gambling the same thing?
Absolutely, especially when my kids are wearing diapers, yeah. Yeah.
All right. Thanks, Matt. Okay, so what does a typical day look like for you guys? I mean, I know we're always trying to breathe down your necks and get you, but what does a typical day look like? I mean, how do you firstly select and then prioritize your stories? Eric, you want to start?
I can go first. Typical day starts making breakfast for my son, taking the, no, oh, you mean the work day? Oh, okay. I would say it's unusual for 2 days to be very much like one another anymore. There's not really much of a routine other than you would be shocked. I'm sure you all experience meeting overload. I think every job does. Journalists go through that twice over because we have all our internal meetings as well as all the interviews we're supposed to be doing with the industry we cover. So it's very easy for an entire day to get completely swamped by those types of meetings, which every meeting you have leaves less room for writing. which is what we're supposed to also be doing. So it's really about managing time and spacing things out over not just a week, but over really like a month sometimes. So it's, kind of patience is important when we're dealing with people who want to talk to us right now about what they're doing, and I totally understand how that feels. But I'm looking at I actually need time to write the things that I've heard about from someone else, and so I need to be able to pace that day out. So average day, I would say, is 3.5 hours of meetings at least. If I'm lucky, an hour of writing, answering emails, a million other tasks related to events or multimedia or a fair amount of Twitter, LinkedIn. It all adds up, right? So probably not all that different from your day, just taking in a lot and synthesizing a lot of that across the different conversations we have. So
You forgot about the dad jokes, Eric.
dad jokes just come naturally. That's not. I don't need to think about that. That's just But good point.
What about you, Grace? Do you have the same experience?
I would say to add on to that more for myself, clearly FreightWaves, we have a lot of data behind our sonar and our company as well. So I actually spend a lot of my day not only booking for some of our shows, the radio show that I do every day, of course, working on different news, but working actually with our market experts and seeing exactly what we're anticipating in the market, and then working with either companies that maybe can validate that too. For me, that's one of my favorite things, is being able to talk to companies who might see those same trends but have different types of data to back some of those situations up, or just have an idea of where the market is going as a team. We're really about that at FreightWaves, working together to kind of in detail. A lot of us have experience in the industry. So for us, we know what products, crops, markets are doing. So it's a little bit more fun to have the data to back that up. So a lot of my day is spent talking with them. On top of that, of course, wrapping that into a lot of the content that I'm doing as well. But for me, I like to kind of take those meetings and go a step farther and dive into maybe the deeper trends of why we're seeing certain things happen in e-commerce, or certain technologies applied. For instance, we just did that great episode with Box C on e-commerce and bringing that in through the border and everything like that. So I do spend a lot of my time actually working with data and the market experts in order to have an idea of kind of where I want to take the next month or quarter, and schedule the companies to kind of back that up as well.
Sure. And Matt, I'm sure it's very different for you, because here we are in industry, we understand the nitty-gritty, we understand the jargon. So what does it take for you to feature a supply chain story or pitch it to tier one media, let's say?
I mean, I think, honestly, my day is not too dissimilar. One, I think, major difference, aside from the amount of time I spend going to and from the coffee store, is pitching. So I might not pitch every day, but I set aside about 10 hours of every week. 10% of every week, which on a good week is not 10 hours, to pitch. And so that process involves researching stories. It might involve managing messages with people, or following up on a conversation that I had with someone like one of you at a bar or at a conference like this. And then actually writing the pitch, finding out which editor to sort of target for the pitch, and then writing it and trying to sell it. So it's a constant sales job for me in that respect. And then, to Eric's point, got to squeeze in the writing, which for me usually happens at night. So I don't know, did I answer your question?
Somewhat.
Okay.
I think one thing to emphasize is the actual writing part is probably the smallest amount of time in a day. That's probably, you may not necessarily, that's sort of counterintuitive, right? Because a lot of us are pretty prolific, and it looks like we're just writing 24 hours a day. The writing is the stuff that actually comes the easiest for me, at least. So it's putting all the building blocks in place that are sometimes hard. So
So then how does one get on your radar? I mean, you have busy days from what you've described with internal meetings and things that you want to do. So how does a company get on your radar then? How do they approach you?
You guys want me to start?
Sure.
For me, it's really two main ways. Number one, I'm a really visible journalist, so I spend a lot of time out and about reporting, just sort of attending events with an open stenopad and an open mind. And so, quite frankly, I joke with my kids that I'm the biggest extrovert I've ever met, and so I have no problem just wandering up to somebody and saying, "Hey, what are you doing?" And so if somebody does that to me, I'm always, willing to have a conversation and just listen. But I am really active on social media, so for cold pitching, which would be when I don't know you, you don't know me, we've not met in person, and you just decide, I'm gonna hit this guy up with an email or send him a direct message on Twitter or Instagram or whatever. I try to respond to all those, especially if they relate to work and not to my my incredible physique. I find that authenticity resonates best with me. So, if somebody maybe isn't sure it's a good story idea, but thinks maybe there's a kernel in there, I'd rather them say, "Hey, I've got this nugget of a good story idea that might be something you can work with," than, sell me a Ferrari, And so I guess that's one sort of piece of advice I could offer from the pitching perspective as a freelancer.
If I could kind of piggyback off that really quick too. When we write about technology, I think sometimes the downside of that is there's often times where I get emails, or LinkedIn's kind of the worst, where it's very automated and very copy and paste and very, it's not personal to either what I write to or what I'm doing. And I think for me, I tend to pay attention more to those who maybe are also invested in what either myself or the company is doing as well. Some of the best people that have reached out to me are usually, "Hey, I saw this episode and it made me think of, this type of story," or "I saw that you worked on this." And I think it's there's that human touch behind technology, right? And I more and more frequently see kind of that automated, I don't know what systems you guys might be using, but that non-personal touch to it. And I also will say, I really do like hearing from the leaders themselves as well. I was just talking to Fallon about my favorite part of my job is being able to talk to the individuals who lead these companies. And there are a number of people who are overly passionate and really work hard to fix these problems, are completely invested in their companies. And every once in a while, there's an egg that I can tell doesn't have an idea of what exactly maybe they are solving. So for me, I really like almost hearing even from the leaders in this space. And I know it's difficult for many of you to pull off, maybe in the PR field or if you're working with those individuals directly. But I think that personal touch also helps develop a relationship. It's just like any type of sales, right? You want to hear from the individuals behind the company that you're talking to. So those in particular, meeting those individuals at these events are really helpful, because of course, you want to know that the person you're talking to is an expert in their field.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Grace. Eric?
So you don't like getting pitches that say, "Dear B2B journalist"?
Yeah. Or, yeah.
It feels very touching to me.
Yeah, it's
I thought you might be interested in XXX.
Yeah.
Oh.
No name in there at all.
Yeah, agreed. So I think of it this way, like if there's a story that breaks and I need to get in touch with someone at a company that something has gone wrong. If I just call up and send an email saying, "Hey, I need to talk to someone at your company that I have zero relationship with, and you need to tell me in explicit detail what went wrong, and I need you to implicitly trust me," right? That one doesn't normally work. Sometimes it works simply because they are expected to say something to the media, but it hardly ever works. So it cuts the same way. it's all about developing a relationship so that when things happen, they happen in context. And the first time I'm hearing from a company is not when something that they want to promote happens or something that they think is major, but in context is not all that major. So having a relationship that is not related to something that they want covered or something that I want to cover is really important. So like having that level set, what does your company do? Who are you? What's your background? What are you trying to do? That kind of thing. Like who are your customers? Just having all of that on background the first time, second time, third time even when we talk means that when something comes up that's actually interesting, I'm not starting from square one. There's a level of trust that you have that I understand what you're trying to do, and your news is placed in context. It's not just sort of standing out on its own and it means a lot less then.
So is this emails then, a series of emails, or?
You want like actual, like messenger pigeon. Emails, you can reach out anyway, WhatsApp, text, Twitter DM, LinkedIn message, email, SMS, whatever. It depends. I have different relationships with different sources. I guess the important thing is find the relationship that works. So if I'm answering you by email, we're having an interaction, that's my signal that that works. If I'm ignoring 3 emails you send me and you WhatsApp me and I get back to you instantly, that's what works. So I don't have a universal like platform that I prefer. Email, I tried my best not to be like, that's a good platform to get like deep background on something that's happened, press release obviously, but it could be just bullet points about what's happened or what your company is or what it's doing. But it's usually better to message me in some way. That's gonna get a more instant response.
Okay, thanks, Eric. Before we get into the anatomy of a press release, I just want to remind you that you can send in your questions by scanning the QR code that you see on the screens, and this is your opportunity, folks. Is there such a thing as the perfect press release or the perfect pitch? Who wants to take that?
I almost could I flip the question and make it more of things what would make it worse?
Sure.
I mean, do you want me to answer the affirmative first? Do you want me to?
Yeah, you do that. Yeah. Yeah,
I do.
Yeah.
I mean, I certainly do not want to talk over you. Your answer is going to be way juicier than mine. But I mean, yeah, the elements of a good pitch or a good press release, right? Number one is obviously the news, right? Number two, and I think really 1A, is the peg. Why should I care about this now? Why is this something we want to write about now? Okay, and then really it's a question of pertinent facts. You want to quote from a contextually relevant source somewhere high up in the document, and then you want to be able to provide enough information so that if a reporter or a writer wants to do a deeper dive, they can, or at least they know where to go to do that. From my perspective, those are the elements of a perfect pitch, but it's way more interesting to talk about PR fails.
Well, and it goes back to, and first, I like to say that I'm probably the most rookie member of the journalist community, so you guys probably hate this 10 times more than I do. But the news, I think, is the biggest point that I want to make. Make sure it's real, true news. I think there's a lot of times where I get
Our customers are happy.
Yeah,
That's
yes.
not news.
We have the best of all. And those statements that are your judgment and maybe not the industry's judgment. We are the first to do this. Now, there's times where maybe you are, but there needs to be very good background of how that's true, or even honestly, sometimes growth without the proper numbers behind it or the ability to speak on the numbers behind it makes it difficult to truly, Pesti, what are you laughing at? To make it a story. Oh, yeah. Those are the things I find a little bit more tough. Now, doing media, and you probably run into this too, there's a lot of times where maybe it's not truly worth writing about at the time, but it would make a great podcast episode, the topic, or something that could be a different form of media. And I usually am good at responding to that and saying, this isn't really breaking news, but I think there is an audience who would find this information very stimulating. So let's work on maybe doing a radio segment or some type of different content that we could share this with. But I think that what is truly news, that's a funny question, it needs to be worked out more. And another thing as well on that, and you brought up the quotes and everything. Whenever you have partnerships, and I guess I'm, again, new, trying to learn this and understand why this happens so much. Partnerships with shippers in particular, or different companies, I want to talk to all parties on that if I am going to write about that. And I understand that there are partnerships where it's push and pull to get a shipper or that partner to truly speak on it. But I would work with the executives that you're working with or partnering with and explain to them the benefits of that, because those stories are really interesting. We're seeing, especially in this industry, more and more shippers investing deeper into their supply chains. And I just find that stuff fascinating. So it irritates me often when it's like, okay, this is great, but who are the customers behind this that you're speaking on? And can we talk to them about it? Because at the end of the day, that's what the sale and the revenue growth is going to come from, is those type of stories too. So yeah, work on those connections. And I think it's going to take some time, but those stories I think are fascinating. And I'm finding more and more of those in recent days.
So the reach outs to us should be one-to-one. Hopefully they're not spray and pray across all the outlets, the same email, right? That's rule number one, is send an email to a specific journalist who focuses on something specific, and not the same email to 20 journalists and hope someone responds. The same thing applies a little bit to press releases, right? It's a one-to-many, right? So you want to get it in front of as many eyes as possible, but the same thing that's going to interest me or potentially Grace is not going to interest Matt because of the outlet he writes for and what he's interested in. So you wouldn't use the same tool to reach us as you would to reach him. So you may have to create different versions of a press release that are catered to the audience that you're trying to address. The other thing, to just emphasize what Grace said, it doesn't kill the idea that we will scrutinize the press release and see if it's worth following up on. But the more times I see the most, the best, the first, the largest, never been done before, the more my eyes immediately glaze over. And I have a memory when I see a company or I see a specific publicist or PR agency using that over and over and over. When I see that email come through on the subject line or the address, it immediately goes down to tier 2, to tier 3 priority for me, because I know you're sort of overselling what's actually happening. So like, the promotional brochures and blogs for your company are the place to talk about this is the greatest thing that's ever been created by man. A press release is not the place to do that, because you're literally talking to the most cynical people in the world. So just cut it out.
Can I just add one other thing? Because I think this is a point that is often overlooked. Press releases need to actually be written in grammatically correct English. And I'm not just saying that because I'm a journalism nerd and sort of a grammar snob. I'm saying it because sometimes it's really hard to understand what people are trying to convey if they're doing it in a convoluted sentence that, is all sorts of crazy. And so, if you are writing a press release and you have someone on your team who is sort of, infamous for being a real grammarly focused, let's say, have that person take a look at the release before you send it out. And I'm not actually speaking of Grammarly capital G. I mean a human who has an English or a journalism degree and understands, what a dangling participle is, and can rein someone in if they've used too many commas. That sort of stuff matters, and people like the three of us, that drives us nuts. Speaking for myself, but I mean, journalists in general really notice that, and it drives us bonkers. And so you're much more likely to get a positive response if your press release actually makes sense and is literate, yeah.
Some interesting questions already coming in. I'm surprised I can read them. Can we enlarge these, please, if possible? But let me attempt it. Someone in the audience asks, how helpful are press releases not brought to you as news, just posted to the wire? Do you ever write about these? Do you pick them up? I mean, do you have an eye on the wire?
If it's news, it's news. For me, it's like if it's posted to the wire, that instantly means it's likely to be, not unique to me. So you have to. It doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not going to write about it. It just means I need to think about how we write about it to position it in a way that's providing more value to our readers than maybe the average person who's picking up on it. But I mean, what I just advised about having different tactics press, I don't think most people do that. So I just assume if I get an email press release, it's essentially the same, it's essentially on the wire somewhere. So I don't look for the wire, by the way. I don't trawl through the wires. If someone says, hey, did you see this? And I don't have an email about it, then I will search Google for it and see it on PR Newswire. But I'm not like, oh, what am I going to write about today? Let me just look through these cool ass press releases.
Yeah, I think that happens, and you said the audience aspect, right? There's been numerous times where I've just flabbergasted that some of this hits the wire before it's even brought up to, sorry, Eric, the number one supply chain news source in our industry. And I'm just sometimes shocked. And there's a number of you out there where I've said, like, here's my cell phone number. Like, if you're working on releasing something like this in the future, like, this is exactly the type of stuff that I enjoy writing about. And it is by audience, but even down to there's oftentimes where, and I understand the purpose of doing it and the situations and fundraising and different things, but that'll go to way higher ups that, boy, your audience is right here captured by us. And so I agree. I'm not searching the wire all day, but there's numerous times where I'm just shocked that some of this will go to these news outlets that weren't even brought up to anyone as a part of our staff. So reach out to us. This is a key audience, a huge audience that we have at FreightWaves, and we'll do a great job of making sure a lot of these really great stories and news is being covered. But it is frustrating for me personally when I see some of this stuff hit, because then, it's by the time I do my own research, reach out to the people I think would be interesting to actually hear about it, it's not really news anymore, and it moves so quick. So, and I'm definitely not going to write about it 2 weeks later. That's where it's going to fall into podcast type of stuff more. But realize the resources that you have in this industry and the outlets and the growth that a lot of us are experiencing.
I will say sometimes if I'm researching a trend story, I will find press releases on a company's website in an archive helpful. So for instance, if I have a topic and I decide, let me see if there are other companies, sort of doing this same thing, I might search through 6 or 7 company websites, go to the press releases and scroll back for 6 months and see if anybody else has issued a press release. So I would say it's probably more valuable to have a release on your site than it is to just randomly shoot it out on the wire, because the wire is always scrolling, right? If a journalist misses it within the 1 hour of freshness, that's it. So if you're going to do that, I would say take the time to put it on the site so that trend story hunting reporters like the three of us, when we have time to take a step back and, control the fire hose enough to write a trend story, might actually find it there and figure out a way to work it into a piece.
Thanks. There's one question that I cannot resist, so I'm going to take that. Is it beneficial to work with an established PR agency? Yes, us, CHARLIE PESTI. But I'll let you answer that as well, Eric.
Loaded question right there. So, meaning, is it beneficial for your clients to work? I would say there's maybe 8 to 10 agencies, and that's grown over the last couple of years, that have taken the time to understand the way I work, taken the time to understand the way my publication works, and is able to channel its clients that are relevant to me and the stories from those clients that are relevant and according to what they know, what I think is important. So yes, I think not an established PR agency, but one that has demonstrated an ability to connect with the journalists that matter in the market they're trying to reach. Yeah.
Thank you. Grace?
Ditto a lot of what he just said. I think I agree. A lot of these firms know the best way to reach out to me, have an idea of what I find interesting, especially doing so many different outlets, what could fall to those different audiences as well. For instance, the radio's heavy truck drivers, right? So if it's carrier technology, that's probably the best place to put that compared to my retail supply chain show, right? So I personally feel like usually the work being brought to me, whether it's the press release or the topic or the background and the resources for interviews are better with a PR agency. I think they seem to prep a lot better for those situations. So yeah, I say it's definitely beneficial, and I think it's the networking aspect too that helps a lot of it as well. Because there's often times where maybe we want to do a story with multiple opinions, right? And it's easier for me to reach out to an agency I know that works with these type of companies, and they can send me 4 or 5 different people I can talk to about that topic compared to having to spend the time reaching out to individual companies here and there. So the work definitely is more efficient that way.
But you shouldn't outsource it completely, right? You still, as the company, have to have a relationship with the reporter itself, right? Yeah. So I'm not like, I know Charlie, I know you, you know how I work. I also have relationships with some of your clients, and they know how I work. So it's not just them hearing it through you, they are doing the work themselves to establish a relationship. So
I think it's critical to work with PR agency, and I'm not just saying that because Charlie's standing there staring at me. I honestly, I've been doing this 26 years, and I would say I have made better friends over those years with folks on the PR side than folks on the journalist side, because
I wouldn't go that far.
No, I mean, I'm being serious. Because it really is all about relationships. And this is something you said. I think the key in finding a PR agency that is going to give you the ROI you seek is moving away from transactional hits and choosing an agency that prioritizes those relationships that Eric talked about. Because I can't tell you how many times I'll meet with someone from the PR side, and they'll say, so when are you gonna, we met a month ago, when are you gonna write that story? When are you gonna write that story? And yeah, okay, that story is important, but it's less about that one story and more about working together for years and years on 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different stories. And the more you can partner up with a PR agency that gets that, the more hits you'll see over time for your company. And so, and that's something that I talk a lot about. I actually speak to PR agencies about this because I get so frustrated by this transactional journalism that constantly happens. Just last week, someone was pitching me to write about a new chef at some fancy hotel in Napa County. I live in Sonoma County in California. The pitch came in on a Monday. By Wednesday, I had a follow-up email. Have you sold the story yet? Friday, she followed up again. And finally on Friday, I said, you know what? I'm gonna decline this opportunity because I haven't even opened up your email a second time yet. It's only 4 days old. And so, again, working with folks who value relationships, I think, is the key. And there are lots of PR agencies that do that really well.
I want to add too, I think and you find more of the, we're the best, kind of those salesy pitches when it is directly from your marketing team. I mean, that's what your marketing team is there for, to help your sales team grow your business. Your PR team or the agency you're using is there to help build the relationships for your reputation, for your growth, for that relationship, I feel like, more with the news. So a lot of times when I am working directly with maybe their director of marketing or CMO, whoever, they've got the sales part of them. I can't blame them. That's how they get paid. That's the point of their job. So I think the PR side will help you develop more of that reputational status with different news companies compared to what your CMO's main job is, which is, right, to work and help increase revenue.
Okay, let me paint a scenario for you, right? I'm a tech company and I have a product roadmap. I'm dropping a new product offering every other month. Will you feature me in your story every other month? Will you write about what's new?
Wow, every other month you're kicking out a new product? That's fantastic, and it works great every time. That's unheard of. Probably not. I can't, unless like you are your ChatGPT or something crazy, and you're just like, no, likely not. Right? It's about the full picture. It's usually, for me, if technology-wise, it's about the problem you're solving, and I've also worked more in the business. I've worked with a lot of these tech companies, and you're not kicking out a new product that works perfect. It's not happening. And so I think maybe a series is something that potentially you could look into, but no, I think it's more about the story behind the problem you're solving for me personally, and less about the actual systems or those more technical things.
So there's to a certain extent, you kind of have to as a journalist, you're like saving companies from themselves.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. Yes.
So if I wrote a story every time a company did we just updated our core system, it's now 3.1. Then 6 months later, we just did another update, it's 3.12. Like, A, people would think I'm getting paid by them. B, people would start glossing over everything they read about that company. So you have to work with them and be like, this cadence of releasing news is not working, right? Like for you, it's certainly not working for me because I'm disregarding it. The other thing that I think is interesting, and I think about this a lot, and it's really hard, it's probably the thing I struggle with the most, is big companies versus small companies. A big company, let's say C.H. Robinson. I don't even know if they're in the crowd or here, but let's just say C.H. Robinson has a bunch of different products, tech, brokerage, forwarding, you name it. They make a product release that's pretty significant for them, but it's still relatively small for their whole business, and everybody kind of already knows what they are. It stands out like that much over their existing business. Startup A, let's just say Eric Johnson Technology Systems, comes out with a new product that has 5 customers, but it's huge for them. It's a massive leap for them. So the prominence of that product is huge. That can be news, even though they're a small company, and even more news, even though C.H. Robinson's is going to affect much more of the industry, and it's a way bigger product, but relative to what their incumbent existence is, it's fairly small. So that's something I wrestle with a lot, is making sure that I'm being fair to both sides. Because a little bit of incremental thing for a small company does matter. It can lead to big things. And an incremental thing for a big company can be meaningful, but it can look really small in context.
Right. Thanks. And what is your perspective on tier 1 media? when people say, okay, I want to be in mainstream media or tier one media, and Matt, I'll come to you in a minute, but Eric and Grace,
You're saying we're not tier one media?
Yeah, okay.
tier one industry
go.
media, you are.
You mean like the Wall Street Journal, Financial Times, that type of
Yeah.
Did you ask, do I want to be with one of them one day?
I
or
asked,
no?
what is your view on that when people in our industry want to be featured in tier one media?
Oh, I feel like you asked me this specifically. So my going theory is that if you're a tech company and you pitch a story to the tier one, you're essentially trying to get the attention of the C-level of your industry, maybe your customers. You're not necessarily influencing anyone in a direct buying capacity, but you're trying to get on the radar of the highest levels of a company. If you're talking to Grace or myself, you're probably wanting to target more of the customer and someone with the buying decision in their hands and hopefully the budget. If you are pitching to like TechCrunch, then you want talent. Basically, you're not searching for customers on TechCrunch. So that's the way I think of it. So it's more of a prestige play when companies are saying, I'm giving this to Forbes first. It's like, well, okay, great. It's going to be forgotten by Forbes readers in exactly 2 weeks. If there's a big news that gets released on one of our sites first, they're going to remember it for a very long time because you're speaking directly to the industry.
And I think we talked about this too. If it does go to tier one, it's free grabs to also produce at the same exact time. I've had situations, a few, not a ton, where some of those tier ones maybe have dropped it quicker than expected or released the news faster.
Or they tell the company, we'll only do an exclusive if no one else can do it for 24 hours.
Yeah, no, it's
Internet age.
21st century. We have jobs, we have people that will. We need to be caught up with the tier ones as well. But I think it goes back to what I was saying, even with the releases. There's oftentimes where those announcements will go there, and it's never even brought to my attention. I think we both do a really great job of being able to trust us with news and be able to understand, maybe the way that you're looking to have this perceived by different audiences. Get with us still. Let us know of these situations, because it's just, I agree, there's times where I'm just like, could be really great news for our audience. It does feel like oftentimes we're almost helping, we're the PR agency, right? We're helping you a little bit with that connection, but I think with as big as our audiences are, it's personally foolish to have Wall Street or Forbes cover something, especially if it's going to be behind a paywall, and not have that be with such a core audience that we both have.
So I know we're almost out of time. Really quickly, the dirty secret about tier one publications, as someone who contributes to them all the time, is that you're going to get a much deeper dive and a much more comprehensive story from the publications that these two people represent to my left. Trade pubs are really where the best journalism is happening within the silo of an industry. And so if I'm going to write a story about trucking or supply chain or freight, whatever, I'm going to read 10 stories of Eric's and 10 stories of Grace's before I even start reporting. And so keep that in mind as you're pitching stories, because this is where the real stuff is going on. And if you have a complicated story to tell, you're not going to get the space to tell it in the New York Times or CNN or the Wall Street Journal, but in these publications you will, and you might also get a follow-up story. So as assets, trade publications become much more valuable on the broader scope.
Thanks, Matt. I think we're nearly out of time, so really quickly, closing comments. One takeaway for everyone here from this session. Grace.
Build relationships with us. We are people just like you. We are the people behind the technology, whatever that you're selling or working with, et cetera. Build a relationship with us, and I think you'll have a way better experience in promoting the businesses and that you're working for.
Thanks, Grace. Eric?
I guess I'd say before you decide something is news about your company, think about whether you would be interested in reading about it if it wasn't your company.
Thanks.
Mine is real easy, and it applies to everything. Don't be an asshole. Just be nice. There's so much negativity and rudeness and entitlement in the media business in general. Being nice, being kind, being helpful goes a really long way.
Thank you so much. Can I please have a big round of applause for my panel? Thank you. Thank you, guys.